Hey, hey, hey. I'm so pumped because this took me 40 minutes to get myself to this point where I could record this because all of this was just not doing what it was supposed to do, which is annoying. Does it mean I have less time to record the pod? No. Um, it just means I'll be doing it later. But anyway, it is Tuesday. Um, Well, look at me, just getting straight into things. It is Tuesday. I have waited again. I'm not waiting for news this time. Just waited because I didn't want to talk about Carlton. That is the reason that we waited. But anyway, welcome to episode 5 of Footy and Stuff. If you are new around here, welcome. If you are not new around here, thank you for sticking by for a fifth consecutive episode, or a fourth, or a third. I don't know how long you've been here. I don't even know who's listening. But we are here. We are here to talk about four, I was going to say four very good finals games. It's probably like two or three very good finals games. Um, Maybe two, maybe one really good finals. I'm waffling again. Let's just get straight into it. Let's do that because there is a lot to unpack. A lot to unpack. All right, let's get into the review of the week. We'll start with Port and Geelong. We'll go in order, obviously. Where do we start with this one? Let's start with my tip last week because I said sitting in this very chair doing my tips last week, something was pushing me towards Geelong. Granted, 50-50 shot, I could just say that about anyone, and then if they lose, I'm like, oh, I said it. But genuinely, it was like I was this close to tipping Geelong because it just felt right. But I went against my better judgment because Port were the team that had the momentum, the wins on the board, probably the better form, definitely the better form. Everything was just everything was in Port's favor, where everything was pushing me towards the Geelong way, if that makes sense. It was a very conflicting game to look at. But I did say, don't be surprised if Geelong pick up this win, and I'm not surprised in the slightest. What I am surprised about is the margin because they dispatched of them quite comfortably, a bit too comfortably. Um, what is the reason for this? Let's go through that. My key difference for Port was always the midfield. So Butters, Rosie, Willem Drew, Ollie Wines, and I'm gonna look. Jason Horn-Francis. His name is right there on my notes because we're about talking. No wonder I forgot about him because clearly Ken forgot about him at the start of the game as well. However, that all aside, they were my difference from the get-go, and Geelong shut them down to perfection. I don't think any of them. I mean, Ollie Wines and Willem Drew, the two of them particularly, their clearance game was still pretty top notch. They were 1 and 2 on the ground for clearances from either team. But the other three, who you expect to really put the hurt on Geelong, were a bit nowhere to be seen. I mean, Rosie and Horn Francis get their goals, great. Aside from that, not too impactful, not anywhere near as impactful as you want them to be. And then Zach Butters just got shut down completely in that first half, and then he got injured. So what's a man to do? So that's where Geelong were always gonna get that ascendancy, and they did that perfectly. Shut them down from where they operate best, and they did that. Um, as I was just saying before, funny that I forget about Jason Horn-Francis when I'm listing off their midfielders because clearly Ken forgot about him as well because he started on the bench. Why did this man take a third of a quarter, I don't know how long, I think it was 7 or 8 minutes. Um, Kane Corns and David King were talking about this on radio, and they said it was 7 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever it was. How, when, in my opinion, he's their most impactful player, and he's the guy who, when you want to get the jump at the start, he's the guy that you work through, and he wasn't there. and I don't understand why. Who are you playing ahead of him? That is more important to that. I get you start Butters and you start Rosie. Aside from that, how does this guy not find a spot even on a flank and push into the midfield? Or what's going on? I don't understand in the slightest. But I'm also not a coach, so who knows? But yeah, the Cats attack just ran riot on on Port. Unbelievable. 4 goals to Stengel, 4 goals to Cameron, one that should be goal of the year, and we'll talk about that later. Um, three to Graham Myers, three to Sean Manor, who was unreal. What a pickup he's been for them. Um, at the time that they picked him up as well, what was it, like 50 something? I don't remember what pick he was. Let's actually just use what I have in front of me. Sean Manor was, oh, he was pick 36. I don't know why I thought he was a lot older. Still, pick 36 is unreal for the output that he's just given them in a final. And is that down to the way Geelong develop players? Maybe. Would he have done that at the start of the year? Maybe not. I mean, I know for a fact he wouldn't have because he played at the start of the year and he wasn't too impactful. But at 27, he's a very mature player. And he showed that in the VFL as well. And that's why they drafted him. So, yeah, Shaw Manor, unreal. Shannon Neal contributed with his 2 goals. Tom Hawkins might come back in the prelim and take his spot. Who knows? Do they play all three of them? I don't care because the team that was there contributed perfectly fine. And they just put Port to bed. Really put Port to bed. I wonder what this does now for Port's mental state going into a semi-final where this exact team has gone and been bundled out at that stage very recently before. And they're going in against probably the most exciting team in the comp. Lots to unpack later, but we will do that later. Um, Next game was the Bulldogs and Hawthorn. Wow. This was always shaping to be the most entertaining game of the round, and it was trumped, but not by any fault of its own. Not by any fault of its own. They're not going to control what happened in the game after this. But it was a very good game of football, particularly early on, I thought. A little bit of tussling from the get-go. And the Bulldogs get a bit of a jump, lead at quarter time by 2 goals, and it's looking like the Bulldogs are a more experienced team. They might run away with this, although Hawthorn were still in it. And then not so much in the second quarter because it was still a game at that point. It just swung the other way. But Hawthorn just absolutely ran away with this game. And it was so impressive. These kids, I I say these kids, they're experienced players stand up as well, week after week after week. It's just such a good mix of players that Sam Mitchell has built over the last 5 years. And before I go on, by the way, I don't like people saying that this team has come out of nowhere because Sam Mitchell's been at this for quite some time. When did Sam Mitchell become the coach of Hawthorn? Like this has been a good build, a rebuild done properly over the last 5 years. He started coaching Hawthorn. Oh, he started coaching Hawthorn in 2022. So he's done three of them. But Clarko was doing this before that. They haven't played finals since 2018. Like this is a team that's been building. Um, and Sam Mitchell's put these pieces into place over the last 3 years, and he's done a fantastic job at doing it. And this has not come out of nowhere. Granted, is it a year earlier perhaps than what we expected? Maybe. But I was always expecting them to present themselves at some point. And they've done it earlier, but this is not an accident. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, they just outclassed the Bulldogs in that second half in transition. I don't. Are they going to win the flag? No, shut up, idiot, idiot. I had the Dogs until now. I have egg on my face about the Dogs. That's why this is so. But I'm not going to go early on the Hawks. We're just going to enjoy it while it happens. And if they happen to do something, it'll probably be the greatest we've ever seen, depending on how far they go. What am I talking about? Um, where did the Bulldogs go wrong? Let's start with Bont. Let's start with Bont. Some of the criticism of Bont has been harsh because I thought it's warranted to a point because by Bont's standards, the game wasn't good at all. Like when you talk about how low his output was, but on the same token, he played a good game of football by anyone's standards, and he was just shut down really well by a good football team. You can't expect players to outshine everyone around them every week. Sometimes they come up against a really good system that is just too hard to beat. I think Connor Nash was on him for a lot of the time from memory. Don't quite, there was a little bit of Jai Newcomb there, and Jai Newcomb was outstanding. Hard players to beat. They made it hard to beat them. That's just how it is. I think we need to focus on giving Hawthorn credit more than we are discrediting what Bont put in because the whole team were down with him. And I get you need someone to spur you on in that moment. He did that. His fourth quarter was very good. He tried his bloody heart out. Tried his heart out. And sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes it doesn't work. One player who really did give it a crack was Rory Lobb. I thought he was their best player on the night. Quite easily. Trelaw was very good, but that's a very statistical analysis there. 28 and a goal. You can't really scoff at that, but I thought Rory Lobb was their best player. Just a really solid defensive effort against the Hawthorn forward line that probably had their best game all year. I don't think they've ever been as good as they were on Friday night. So he gave it a crack. Yeah, yeah, you can't really scoff at him for someone who's not a natural defender either. He's been shoehorned in that role because of injury and whatnot, and he's done a really fantastic job up until now. And he really did all he could do, in my opinion, when the whole team is getting torn apart, really, like they were. But yeah, Hawthorn Mosquito Fleet triumphant. Um, just unreal. Nick Watson, led by a kid, just coming of age game of football for him. Obviously, he's had good games. He had his breakout earlier in the year and whatnot, but this is the game when this kid is older, when he's in his late 20s and he's had his career and he's kicked his goals and whatnot, because I fully expect him to have a very good career. We're going to look back on this game as the night that Nick Watson arrived. Just tore him apart. And he had the support as well. Connor McDonald was fantastic. Jack Ginnivan did what Jack Ginnivan does. Love him. Absolutely love him. Stop getting into Jack Ginnivan. Doesn't play for Collingwood anymore. Get off his back. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Um, Not really, but no, I'm come on. Cal Shadir was great as well. Could have had more. 3 goals, four, but just a really good game. Hard to stop again. So Hawthorn and their forward line are on a roll. And with that, we go into the next game. Sydney and GWS. Wow. 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 Sydney started slow again, which is just it's really the story of their season, isn't it? Like, I expected them. I don't know if I gave a margin on my pod last week, but I was on the Carlton Besties podcast and I said Sydney would win by 60 points. And I was pretty convinced that they were going to really roll them. And I think I said on this podcast as well that they were going to they were going to win comfortably. But that was all provided that they got rid of this thing where they just can't start games well. I don't know what it is. But granted, The lead never blew out for the Giants. So Sydney were on the back foot, but like 7 points at quarter time, 21 points at halftime, 21 points again at three-quarter time. It was always within reach. And because of that, watching this game, I always knew that Sydney had something in them, a good patch in them. They always have a good patch or two late in games. And it was always coming for me. It was always coming. The pressure early was absurd, especially for the Giants. Like it was just fun football to watch. It's always fun when just bodies everywhere, and that's what this game was. But the good teams always get the job done, and Sydney got the job done. Um, and now every game, the importance of this is that every game where they're on the back foot, at least for the rest of this year, every game that they're on the back foot, they're going to believe that they can get the job done, and that's such a massive thing because they've done it a few times now, where if they make a or they're in the prelim, if they make a grand final, or in the prelim, if they go 4 goals down, they're never gonna tuck their tail between their legs and give up. Where some teams might do that if they feel it's out of reach, it will slip away from them, which we have seen this weekend, and we'll get to that in a minute. But um, no, Sydney just unreal. The margin was always reachable, and they got the job done. Isaac Heaney, how dare you? How dare you, Isaac Heaney? Absolutely disrespectful. Disrespectful performance. I don't get. Imagine Isaac Heaney got moved into the role he's in now 5 years ago. Granted, like, shoulda, coulda, woulda, but he's so good. He's so good. Is that the best game I've ever seen him play? I think the answer is yes. All things considered, the answer is yes. If you analyze it purely on a statistical basis, maybe there are other games where he was a little bit better. But in a final, backs against the wall, you need something to spur your team on. This guy took one of the greatest marks I've ever seen. He kicked 3 goals. He took a one-handed mark in the forward line to set up. I think he got a goal after that. We'll say, for argument's sake, a one-handed mark in the forward line to set up one of those goals. Had 30 touches, pretty much gave his team the win in the end. Just the most composed, brilliant performance. Maybe the best finals performance I've ever seen. Aside from maybe one or two of those dusty ones that were scattered in there, so I couldn't actually pinpoint a single one of those. But this was just remarkable. As many words as I've said over the last couple of minutes, I'm genuinely speechless at how good this bloke is. Um, we're going to talk about that mark and Jez's goal in a second, but I want to get to Carlton Brisbane first. But that mark was just fantastic as well, and well on Jack Buckley for helping him down there. And if he hits the ground there and gets injured, then there's a world where Sydney don't win this game. So yeah, crazy, crazy stuff. Um, but let's move on to Carlton and Brisbane before we talk about some news and some other stuff. Oh boy, 3 days removed. What's the overriding feeling? Still disappointed, still angry, still everything, but I'm almost a bit relieved now because knowing that we just weren't going to get anything out of this year, I'm glad that it's now done and we can look ahead now because God, torturous to watch that football in the first half. We just weren't locked in at all, weren't engaged, clearly weren't about it. Whatever the reason for that is, I don't know. I think it's so complex and so multifaceted. Um, the reasons as to why that happened. I don't understand why it takes us until we're however many points down in a game to give it a crack. This time it was 60 points to actually turn on and uh and give it a go. But yeah, going both ways, we were just so far from average. I was gonna say we were so average, but we weren't. Average would have left us close enough to actually give it a crack in the end. We were far from average. It isn't even funny how bad we were. And especially going forward. We've struggled with those entries into forward 50 at times this year, many times this year, but it was just so poor. The lack of creativity, the lack of pressure, they just they had us for breakfast. They had us for absolute breakfast. Um, so from a pure structure and game plan perspective, that's what that is what it is. It's done now. The deconing sub decision was questionable. Kennedy being taken off for deconing was even more questionable. He, Tommy was good when he came on. That shows that he should have started the game. And I do understand the logic from a sense of we didn't think he was going to play 4 quarters. That's from Michael Voss. If you didn't think that he could play the whole game, why don't you start him? Because his impact is enough to spur the team on to get something going. And then from there, if the game's in reach and he can't play out the game and we want to bring on some fresh legs, whoever that would have been, I don't know, then you make that decision. To bring him on when we're 60 points down is just like, what's the guy meant to do? And granted, he had a bloody good crack at it, but what's he meant to do? So yeah, just so questionable. Kennedy going off was yeah. I really feel for the bloke. I really feel for the bloke. I don't think he'll leave. Everyone's jumping to conclusions with him. Oh, I wouldn't blame him if he requests a trade, sure. But he's not going to. He's not going to. And if he does, then fair play to him, but he's not. He's not. It's yeah. But I think he would have been important. Granted, at that point, we weren't winning the game. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. The third quarter switch was interesting. It felt like when those two misses happened, I think it was Logan Morris in front of goal, and then was it Zach Bailey who did all the fumbling when he should have kicked the goal? I don't remember exactly who it was, but I remember the two moments. And it felt like the footy gods were doing something, and this is how stupid we are, that I can sit there and we're down by 30 something points in the third, deep in the third quarter. Really hard to reach in a final against a team that's playing good enough football. It felt like the footy gods were doing something, and we find reasons to believe, and that obviously comes from a place of passion and love for the club more than anything, and desire. But yeah, I thought we were by far the better team in that third, and we got not nowhere near enough from it in the end. In saying that, they 1000% took a foot off the pedal, the Lions. They were on cruise control in that second half. Were we much better? Yes. Were they in a position where they knew they could see out the game of football and look ahead to the Giants next week already, which is just like, yeah, they were 100% chilling. 100% chilling. If they were going full ball, we would have lost by quite a quite a larger margin. But anyway, the Nick Newman incident. Uh, it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one. I didn't like what Nick did. Um, I want to preface by saying that because there are other ways to handle that situation than to throw an elbow at a guy when he's running at you. Don't be an idiot. In saying that, I don't think it connected with Lachie Neale's throat, and that's evident by The tribunal reading, tribunal reading, tribunal. It wasn't. Didn't even go to tribunal. The match review. Um, idiot. Didn't go to tribunal. Evident by the match review. It was graded. I just want to clarify this. Intentional conduct, correct. Low impact, arguable. Um, but I'd say probably correct. I thought Lockie Neal knew what he was doing there. Threw himself to the ground for sure. And it said body contact, which I assume means um that we're under the assumption that it's connected here. And I wouldn't be surprised by that fact. I don't know for sure because the angle that we were given was a zoom out from 50 meters with little fuzzy men running around and a little circle around the incident, and we're apparently meant to see that perfectly. But yeah, no, I thought Lockie Neal was very aware of what he was doing there. I don't think it was a hard hit at all. And based on that, it's probably the right grading. If he gets him in the throat and it's a harder hit, um, then sure, it's well worthy of a suspension in that case. But um, I don't think it was any of those things, in my opinion. But I would love a closer angle of that, if anyone has that. What's the last thing to talk about? Sam Doherty. Haven't talked about that. Doherty, the motivation behind bringing Doherty in is great if they actually give it a crack. Like the whole thing around Doherty was, yeah, it's going to be a great momentum boost for this team. Everyone loves Doc. Everyone's going to see this as an opportunity to spur themselves on to have a good game because Doc's back in. Yeah, great. Where was it? Where was it? Everything they said, or I say everything that they said, everything that we all thought this was going to do for the team was absent. So then what? In saying that, people are so people love to find little reasons and just scapegoat. That's the reason. People love scapegoating people when we lose games of football. It's rotten. It's rotten. He's not even close to the reason we lost. The result does not change with or without Sam Doherty. And I thought his first game back after an ACL injury was a pass mark. He was probably more forward thinking and not not creative, but his decision making had more purpose per se than pretty much 90% of that team on the night. I thought what he brought was a lot better than what I've seen or what I was seeing on the night from a lot of those players, in my opinion. Was he 100%? No. I don't think anyone expected him to be 100%. But you also have to look at it on the side of if all the players who were meant to stand up and didn't stand up end up playing the game that we expected them to play and we win the game of football and Doherty has that exact game, we say, oh, wow, Doc, that was great. Great first game back. He contributed, he played his role, well done. But because we lost and players who should have stood up didn't on the night, we're now looking at Doc and saying he wasn't ready, he should have played. It baffles me. It does. It genuinely does. Maybe I've missed the mark here. Someone tell me. Um, but I just think there were so many more reasons, broader reasons, particularly. Like we're missing a big problem here if we're targeting Doc and saying that's the reason. That's why we lost. Insane. Insane to me. Granted, no one's pinpointing it as the sole reason, but it's just so don't search for little excuses like that when you know that there's a much bigger problem than Sam Doherty at this football club. Nobody got injured. Nobody got injured. Isn't that crazy? Oh man, man. Yeah. Look, Carlton, it's a failed season at the end of the day. We're all licking our lips looking at that back end of the year when we were top four, and we look at that final few rounds and we see St Kilda, West Coast, Hawthorn, Collingwood, because they weren't necessarily in form at that point. We were licking our lips, and we won one of those four games that I just mentioned. It's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. But we're stupid, so we're going to be there. We're going to be there next year. We're going to pay our membership. We're going to come back, and we're going to get delusional all over again. That's what we do. Can the mighty beggars. Let's move on. Let's move on to the news review. What's in the news? Where do we start? Well, we talked about the mark and goal of the year stuff, so let's start with that. Um, what we saw this weekend was two incidents, if you want to call them that, two moments, one mark and one goal that were worthy and I think would have won mark and goal of the year on Brownlow night if games in the finals were eligible to provide moments that can be nominated for these awards. That was a lot of words for me to say mark and goal of the year should be finals awards as well. They just should. Because that the mark in particular from Isaac Heaney is one of the best marks I've ever seen. Quite easily. Like genuinely unreal. And I know we had three very good marks this year in Dersma, Bobby Hill, and Jamie Elliott. But that is just unheard of from Isaac Heaney, that mark. He wins it. He wins it quite easily, I think. And he can't win it. And then the goal of the year side of things, probably a bit of a lackluster um selection of nominees this year. And that Jezza goal is just miles ahead of all of them. Like you can't be doing that. You can't be doing that. It was genuinely out of this world for a big man to do that from the boundary, um, on his left foot, bend it the way he did in a final. It would have been my goal of the year. And these awards are only home and away season awards, apparently. The AFL need to do something about this. They need to do something about this year. It's a shame that we had to wait to a point where two players are now going to be cost those awards because of it, and now they might do something about it. I also don't know how they would do it because I did think about this. So if you keep the awards on Brownlow night and you add finals eligibility, the the Brownlow is still before the grand final, which means the grand final will be ineligible. And then the next point of call is if someone takes the greatest mark that's ever been taken in the history of the game on grand final day, they then won't be eligible. So do you leave the awards until after grand final day and present them not on Brownlow night? That's a question to be had. And that's something that they would investigate if they were to um, dive into this and work out a solution. But yeah, I think at the very least, um, those first three final games should definitely be eligible heading into Brownlow night and then work out the grand final problem. I don't know. I don't work at the AFL, so brilliantly, I don't have to work this problem out. There are people who are getting paid to work these things out. So please, please do, because Isaac Heaney and Jeremy Cameron would have had a real case for those awards, in my opinion. Next point of call. Bailey Smith requests a trade out of the Bulldogs. I think we all saw this coming, didn't we? I don't think anyone expected this to not happen. Um, or at least the news to come up frequently. Maybe the request And the certainty of it all has taken some Bulldogs fans by surprise and caught them off guard. But I didn't expect him to be playing in Footscray next year. So I'm not surprised by this. The suitors that have presented themselves are still the three that have come up over the last few weeks. It's Hawthorn, it's Geelong, and it's Collingwood. Where do I expect him to go? Probably Geelong. Um, there is talk of um or uncertainty rather as to what they actually have to offer for Bailey Smith. Granted, if they were to win the flag, they're probably looking at a pick in the 20s once they get pushed back, and that's their highest pick in the draft. Um, and whether that would be enough for Bailey Smith is yet to be seen. I think they're probably going to find a way to facilitate the trade, especially if Bailey Smith thinks that's the best place for him and wants to facilitate that. The Bulldogs will get that done. Other than that, Hawthorn would be a great fit, I think, which would just be if they were to get Bailey Smith, Tom Barrass, and Josh Battle in the same trade period and add them to an already fantastic best 22 of footballers. Geez, I'm already thinking that they're probably the premiership favourite heading into next year in my head. That would just, it'd go a long way. I'll tell you that much. And then Collingwood, I don't think they have a lot to offer for Bailey Smith, but they could probably use Bailey Smith for sure. With aging players, obviously the versatility is um the best facet of his game probably. And when you've got guys like Sidebottom, Pendlebury, Mitchell's kind of getting on, but not as much. But those older players in those positions, um, a bit of transition will be needed, and he's probably the ideal candidate for them to make that transition. As for what they have to give up, I don't know. But they're probably on the back foot. I don't think they're as spoken about in regards to Bailey Smith as Hawthorn and Geelong are. But it's interesting, and we'll see it pan out. And we'll be doing podcasts over the off season, so when that develops, we will speak about it. The only other thing I wanted to speak about was Melbourne and Kate Roffey and Brad Green. So Kate Roffey stands down from Melbourne during the week, which caught a lot of people by surprise. Brad Green steps in. Is he interim or is he just there now? That's a question that I should have. Um, Brad Green takes role. Says he takes the role. I'm assuming it's not an interim role, and he is the president of the club now. Yeah, former star Brad Green to succeed Kate Roffey as Melbourne Football Club president. Okay. Anyway, yeah, Kate steps down, caught us all by surprise, caught me by surprise, rather. I don't know if people saw this coming. Um, and Brad Green steps in, and now they're embarking on an external review, which is needed, necessary, because I feel a lot of people are expecting Melbourne to jump back in next year. I don't see it that way at all. I see this as a club moving backwards, at least in terms of on-field performance. And the only way to nip that at the bud before it can happen is an external review. Work out what is going on at this football club. Because rumors of players wanting to leave, other players actually wanting to leave, unrest, alleged culture problems. There's so much going on, so much outside noise. God knows what's happening on the inside at this club. So yeah, it's interesting. Max Gawn said on Triple M Radio that he doesn't understand why this is a news story and that every club should be reviewed and it's just a necessary protocol. I think that's a very smart thing to say as the captain to settle nerves and calm outside noise. But I think we all know what this is. Um, And it's an important step to take for a club that are at risk of taking massive backward steps um, as a football team. So yeah, it's interesting. We'll see what this process entails, what happens with players and uh and higher ups over the next couple of weeks and a couple of months. But I think it's necessary. So we'll see what goes on. And I think that's really it for news this week. I think that's it. With finals going on, there's not really a lot that's too eventful. Obviously, there's bits here and there that we've spoken about, but finals is um the main event of the next few weeks. All right. With that being said, let's get into something a little bit different. We're getting into something a little bit different today. We're not doing the quiz. We're bringing back Gridley. Let's do this. There's a Nick Watson one as well, which is great because um, we just gassed him up before. But yeah, I couldn't really find any quiz that I wanted to do or that was good enough to do or that I could be bothered doing. So I think this is a nice change. Bringing back Ridley. It's been a bit dead for a while. As trends are, they come and go. But anyway, let's do this. We got Hawthorn, 100 games or less, played in a final, 4+ goals in a final, Nick Watson teammate, and 180 centimeters or shorter. Where do we start? Where do we start? Let's go with the Nick Watson teammate that's played in the final because that's reserved to the 23 boys that played. Um, I don't know where people would go with this. Would they aim for the niche ones? Because straight away, Josh Ward comes to mind. Probably the lowest end player I can think of that played. Straight away, Josh Ward comes to my head. But then you have like, are people going to go straight to Sicily, straight to Newcombe, Ginnivan? I feel like I need a happy medium. Someone who's good and someone who's important, but not too niche. And I immediately think Jack Scrimshaw when I think that. I spelled his name wrong. Scrimshaw. Scrimshaw. Not a bad guess. 3%. That's okay. That's good. Um, okay. Okay. We've got an undo as well, which is good. I am going to use the undo if I stuff up at any point. 180 centimeters or shorter could be an easy one to do generally. 180 centimeters or shorter, played 100 games or less. Who's a short player in the league? How feels like Bailey Humphrey? He feels short, but is he shorter than 180? Probably not. Um, do we avoid that for now? Let's go up to 4 goals in a final because that could be anyone. You could pluck a tall forward, and they've probably done it. But Bill Brownless. Let's go with Bill. There you go. 0.2% for Bill. Um, this is good. What are we aiming for here? 9 of them, probably aiming for an average of 2%. So let's say anything under 20 is good. And if I get one wrong, then I'm a failure. 4 goals in a final for Hawthorn. Again, like how obvious is Jason Dunstall here? Or like a Buddy Franklin's probably more obvious. Roughhead's very obvious as well. Cyril would have done it. Um, Derm. Derm could be an option. I feel like people aren't going to look to Jason Dunstall before they look to Buddy or Roughhead or even Derm. It's probably between Dunstall and Derm for me. Who would get more? I feel like Derm would get more, and I don't know why. 7%. It's not bad. Could be worse. Probably not good for my 20 target though. Not good for my 20 target. Let's move on. Um, Nick Watson teammate for Hawthorn. Literally anyone. Oh, who's niche? I feel like I gotta go a niche one here. Also, just got another one of those players that's on the scrimshaw level where he's kind of that in that mid range. Um, isn't too crucial, but isn't too niche. Who falls in that category is the question. It is a question. I wonder what Sam Frost would be doing here. I like a Sam Frost here. 4%. Not bad. 100 games or less. Let's go with like a Max Ramsden there. Because I thought, oh, okay, that's fantastic. That's very good. Because I thought of him here. Maybe he would have scored more where I put Frost. I don't know. It's all pretty good though, that row. I'm not mad about it. So 4, 2, 3, 9, 16, 16.2 we're on. So we've got to shoot for less than 1% on a couple of these, probably. 180 centimeters or shorter, 100 games or less. So we could pick anyone in the competition who's like young or youngish. Do we think Charlie Spargo's played 100 games? I don't think he has. I don't think he has. He hasn't. 0.8%. That's very good. Could have used him for the final one, though. Could have. 180 centimeters or shorter, played in a final. A small forward who's played in a final. Lindsay Thomas would have played finals for North. I think that's a very good one, to be fair. Because again, known, but are people looking at North for finals? Don't know why I clicked that. They're really not. Like, this is smart for me. Hawthorn one's going to be harder to nail on. Just anyone who's short who's played for Hawthorn. Small forwards. I don't necessarily need to look there. Like, I'm sure there are old players who are short as well. Like, how tall is like John Platten? I've seen him in real life as well, and I know he's not that tall. Let's give it a go. Yeah, it's a great one. 6% though is really not that good in terms of what I'm shooting for here. What am I on? 13, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, I've hit 20% already. So I'm a little over what I wanted out of this. But still got the one guess. 4 goals in a final, 100 games or less. How did those Geelong boys do on the weekend? I said it before. I think Mana kick three. Myers kick three. Stengel kick four. Stengel is a good option. Oh no, he would have played 100 games by now, surely. 3 full seasons for the Cats, pretty much. About 60 something games. How many games would he have played for the Crows? I reckon he might be under. I reckon he might be. And if he's not, I've got an undo. He's not. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he is. 8% though. That's a bit more than I expected. 31.5. Could be better. Could be better. Could be worse though. 2,600 people still play this game. Granted, I've just played it, so who am I talking about? Um, Not bad. Not bad. Average rarity is 169, so I think I've done pretty well. Cool. All right. Let's stop that recording and boot this baby home. Okay. Really should have just kept the screen recording going. I've had to press record again when I'm still using the screen. Okay, these aren't filled in, so let me just quickly do that. Okay, this is where we're at. Boy, oh boy. Let's start with Friday night. We'll start with Friday night. Port Adelaide and Hawthorn. Oh dear. This is harder for me than it is for some people. It is. It's harder for me than it is for some people. I think a lot of people are writing Port Adelaide off here. They have a lot to play for. Ken's job is probably on the line. Second place would be wasted, and I don't think anyone at that club wants that. So they're going to be motivated to an extent. But that loss to Geelong is just what do you do after that? I think it does a lot to a team's mental state and mental capacity going into the next game, especially when it's a final and you're staring down the barrel of a second consecutive straight sets exit. I think the Hawks are going to win. They're coming in with so much momentum out of that win against a team that were potentially equally as exciting, equally as good going into that game. They really dispatched of them. And the way they did that, you take a lot out of that as a young team. And I think they're very capable where some people questioned how they would adjust to the moment and the pressure of the moment. They're very capable of just taking it and running with it. It's just I don't know what Sam Mitchell has drilled into this team, but they're here to play. And I think they're going to beat the Power. I don't think it's going to be a dropping. I don't think it's going to be a thumping by any means. I think they'll win by 3, 4 goals. Cruise home. It might be closer in the lead up. These two teams have had a close game already this year at Adelaide Oval. We remember what happened that time. The Hawks blew a lead, and the Power kicked a miraculous goal late to seal the win. I think it'll be close again, but I think Hawthorn just they're Hawthorn under pressure. Danger, 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 danger. So I'm going the Hawks. That sets up a brilliant prelim if that happens. The second game, Saturday night, is the Giants and the Lions. Much harder to pick than the other game for me. Very even, very even. What have we seen from these two teams? I guess that's the easiest way to analyze it. So, Brisbane, I think they might come in a lot fresher. They might come in a lot fresher because, as I said before, I think they took their foot off the pedal just a little bit against Carlton in that second half. And why wouldn't you when you're 10 goals up at halftime? Although 8 goals up because we kicked 2 late ones, but semantics. Giants, on the other hand, were playing very good football and they're capable of playing good, very, very good football, and we know that. But they would be absolutely spent from that last quarter of footy. They were just always on the back foot against the Swans. And I guess that's reflective of how the Swans play and what the Swans are capable of and what we know they can do late in games. But again, we speak about momentum, and I wonder what this will do for their momentum. Also staring down the barrel of a straight sets exit, much like Port. It'll be interesting to see how they adjust to this, being on the other side of this caper. Because last year, obviously, they were seventh, won the elimination final, came up against Port, and they were the team hunting the upset. And they were the team that sent Port out in straight sets. They are now the team that have to fight off the Lions. A very good Lions team, who I think are going to have so much momentum going into this game after what they did to us. I really do. I'm going to tip the Lions. I think we're getting double straight sets. I think we are. I think we're getting it. It's such a tough game, that one. It could go either way. I think much like Sydney and the Giants, it's going to come down to the wire. I think it'll be a very late last gasp effort from one of the teams to pick up this win. And if that happens to the Giants twice, God, I would feel sorry for them. But I think it'll happen. I think Brisbane in a close one. And that's where we land. So for me, the prelims are going to be Sydney and Hawthorn and Geelong and Brisbane. Sydney, Hawthorn, and Geelong is just like so frustrating to look at because that's my childhood watching football. These teams were the teams that were dominant, and they're dominant again. And it's gonna almost be disheartening to watch. But the Lions were pretty poor for that time, so it's good to see them up and about. It is their last chance, though. So, in my opinion, or it could be their last chance, because they've had so many runs at it. But yeah, they're a big chance, and I think these are the two prelims: Sydney, Hawthorn, and Geelong and Brisbane. Am I content with that? No. I really don't know with this Giants and Brisbane game. I really don't know. It's probably it's harder than any of the games last week, I think. Even harder than Bulldogs, Hawthorn, and Port and Geelong. I mean, Bulldogs, Hawthorn wasn't that hard for me, to be fair. I was pretty convinced that the Dogs were going to win that. But Port Geelong for sure was a bit of a yeah. That's going to be such a fun watch on Saturday night. But anyway, that marks the end of another episode of Footy and Stuff. It's going to be a good weekend of footy. It is. And we're going to be down to four teams as I meet you next week. But until then, thank you for watching. Please like, please subscribe, comment suggestions as always. If you're listening on Spotify currently or on Apple Podcasts, please give us a rating. Please share. It all helps. Everything helps. Knowing that people listen and like the podcast is a good thing. Aside from that, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Footy Stuff Pod. What's the other thing that I say every week? Oh, the TikTok as well. My personal TikTok is where I post the clips. Um, so follow that as well at Brandon.Pertain. I did this last week as well for sure. I don't know why I can't remember that username, but I feel like I have to get it right. So I'm going to look it up right now at Brandon.Pertain. Um, do that. But aside from that, I will see you next week to unpack the second week of finals and look ahead to some prelims. We're getting there. We're getting there. We are getting there. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching and goodbye.